Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the command rail as the bridge shuddered violently, red alerts flashing across every console like strobing wounds in the dim light. "Status," she barked, her voice slicing through the relentless wail of sirens that filled the air with urgent cacophony. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, her executive officer, spun from the tactical display, sweat beading on his forehead and glistening under the harsh overheads. "Incoming missiles, ma'am, dozens of them vectoring in from the Orion Armada. They've breached the outer perimeter. ETA to impact, 3 minutes. Elena nodded sharply, her mind racing through the protocols she'd drilled 1,000 times in simulations and live drills, each one a lifeline etched into muscle memory. The alien fleet, those sleek biomechanical horrors from the uncharted void, had finally made their move, emerging from the shadows of the Orion Arm like predators long stalking their prey. No declaration of intent, no offer of parley or negotiation. Just the cold, mechanical efficiency of a first-strike protocol, calculated to glass Earth's distant colonies before humanity could even blink in response. She slammed her palm on the comm panel, the impact echoing her resolve. "All hands battle stations. Engineer Reyes, I need shields at full power and engines hot. We're not dying in dock like sitting ducks." From the lower decks, Chief Engineer Sophia Reyes's voice crackled back over the intercom, laced with her usual dry wit that somehow cut through the tension like a knife. "Shields spinning up, Captain. But these bastards have packed their warheads with something nasty. Exotic particles that don't play nice with our tech. If they hit, it'll scramble our quantum drives like eggs in a blender, leaving us dead in the water." The bridge crew moved like a well-oiled machine honed by endless drills, their fingers flying over holographic interfaces that shimmered and reformed under their touch, pulling up targeting data, shield configurations, and evasion vectors in a blur of blue light. Elena's eyes locked on the main viewport, where the stars blurred into elongated streaks as the station's massive thrusters fired, propelling the hulking structure away from its mooring. In the distance, the Orion ships loomed larger, their hulls pulsing with eerie bioluminescent veins that throbbed like living arteries, launching salvo after salvo of missiles into the void. Humanity had seen them coming for months now, scout probes darting through the solar system, testing defenses with surgical precision, but no one had anticipated the full assault without even a whisper of warning, a thunderclap in the silence of space. "Evacuate non-essentials to the escape pods," Elena ordered Marcus, who was already relaying the command into his own comm unit, his voice steady but urgent. He hesitated for a split second, his cautious nature showing in the deep furrow of his brow and the way his fingers paused over the controls. "Captain, if we abandon sections of the station, we lose structural integrity across the board. The station's our best shot at holding them off. It's fortified, armed, a real bulwark." She met his gaze squarely, her own eyes steady and unyielding, the weight of command etching lines around them that hadn't been there months ago. Better to be alive and fighting from a Corvette than dead heroes on a floating tomb. "Do it, Lieutenant. That's an order." As the first missile streaked closer on the tactical overlay, proximity klaxons howling their piercing warning, Sophia's update cut in over the comms, her tone urgent, but controlled. "Particle interference confirmed. It's rewriting our shield harmonics in real time. I can reroute power from life support to bias 30 seconds, but it'll get cold fast in here." Breath fogging on the visors, Elena felt the deck plates vibrate under her boots, a deep tremor that resonated through her bones, the station protesting the strain. "Make it 20 seconds. Hale, target the lead salvo with the railguns. Let's thin the herd before they overwhelm us." Marcus punched in the firing sequence with practiced speed, and the station's massive railguns thrummed to life, a rhythmic pulse that shook the entire structure as they hurled kinetic slugs into the void at hypersonic speeds. Explosions bloomed silently against the black expanse, debris scattering like a swarm of fireflies in the night. Brief flares of light marking each hit. But for every missile they swatted down in a satisfying burst, 2 more slipped through the defensive net, closing the gap inexorably, their trajectories unerring. The bridge lights flickered erratically as the outer shields buckled under the exotic particle barrage, energy fields warping and failing in cascades of static. Alarms screamed overload warnings, a cacophony that drowned out all but the essentials. Elena braced herself against the rail, whispering a curse under her breath in the momentary lull. This was it, the razor edge of extinction for humanity's frontier outposts. and Earth's ragtag defense force was all that stood between the aliens and the homeworld, a thin line of steel and will. Sophia's voice broke through again, urgent now, laced with the edge of someone pushing tech to its limits. Captain, I've got a jury rig ready, a feedback loop on their particles. It'll bounce the next wave right back at them, but it'll fry our forward arrays in the process. Your call on this one. Elena clenched her jaw, the decision hanging heavy in the air like the smoke from a fresh weld. Sacrifice the guns to turn the tide of battle, or hold the line and pray for a miracle that might never come. The alien fleet's shadows were swallowing the stars on the viewport, their advance relentless. Elena gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles whitening against the worn synth leather that had seen better days. The alien signatures pulsed on the holoscreen, relentless and unfeeling, their exotic particles chewing through the shields like acid eating into hull plating, corrosive and inevitable. Do it, Sophia, she said, her voice steady despite the knot twisting in her gut, a cold weight of responsibility. Fry the arrays if you have to. We turn their own hell back on them, make them taste their own medicine. Sophia's fingers flew across her console down in engineering, rerouting power in frantic bursts that lit up the readouts like a fireworks display. Loop engaging, 3 seconds to feedback. The bridge hummed with a low vibration building in the deck plates as energy surged forward, coiling like a spring ready to unleash. Elena watched the tactical display intently, missiles inbound, a deadly swarm of glowing threats narrowing the distance with predatory grace. One slipped past the point defenses in a lucky dodge, slamming into the outer hull with a distant thud that rattled the half-empty coffee mug wedged beside her chair, sending it skittering across the console. Impact on Sector 7, reported Jax from the engineering feeds, his voice crackling over the comm but steady as rock. The big man, all muscle and quiet resolve, patched in from below decks where the real fight against the ship's innards was waged. Hull breach sealed with emergency foam, but we're venting atmosphere into space. No casualties yet. Crew's holding steady. Elena nodded to herself, her eyes locked on the screen, refusing to blink. Jax had been her anchor since the academy days, the cautious one who double-checked every weld, every protocol, turning potential disasters into footnotes. Now he was knee-deep in plasma conduits, holding the ship together with spit, ingenuity, and a swear word or two. Keep it tight down there, Jax. We can't afford another hit like that. Every breach is one step closer to the edge. The feedback loop ignited then, a ripple tearing across the void that was invisible at first, then blooming into a cascade of reversed particles that lit up the sensors. The alien barrage halted mid-flight, their vectors flipping like a mirror image reversed in an instant. Missiles that had been hurtling toward them like arrows now arced back toward their launchers, blooming into silent fireballs against the dark hulls of the Orion fleet. Secondary explosions rippling through their ranks. Cheers erupted on the bridge, short, ragged bursts from the skeleton crew who manned the stations, their faces pale but alive with a spark of defiance. Sophia slumped back in her chair below decks, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, her witty edge softened by the exhaustion etching lines on her face. Told you it'd work, Captain. But forward arrays are slag now, melted scrap. We're blind up top, no eyes on what's coming straight at us. Elena allowed a tight smile to crack her features, the first real relief in what felt like hours, blind but still breathing. Good work, all of you. The alien formation wavered on the scans, signatures scattering as they recalibrated their tactics, probing for weaknesses. But the victory felt thin, fragile as spun glass. Fresh scans showed their capital ship pivoting slowly, a behemoth uncoiling weapons platforms that dwarfed anything in Earth's arsenal. Massive and ominous. Resource shortages be damned. They were outgunned, outmanned, running on fumes after months of hit-and-run skirmishes that had drained their stockpiles to the bone. Captain, Jax cut in over the comms, his urgency sharpening his tone like a blade. Power grid's unstable down here. That loop pulled too much from the core reactors. If we push the engines for any kind of evasion, we risk a cascade failure that could light us up from the inside. She glanced at the readouts flickering on her console. Fuel cells hovering at a precarious 23%. Shields regenerating sluggishly like a wounded animal. The aliens weren't retreating. They were adapting already. Their next volley forming on the edge of sensor range, a gathering storm. Elena's mind raced through the options. Hold position and fight blind against superior numbers, or run and buy precious time for the colonies to evacuate their populations. The stakes pressed in from all sides. The weight of 6 billion souls back on Earth, a ghost haunting every decision she made, every order she gave. "Plot a microjump," she ordered the navigation officer, her voice brooking no argument. "Minimum distance. Slingshot us behind that asteroid cluster for cover. Sophia, spoof our signature. Make them think we're limping dead ahead, easy prey." Sophia arched a brow over the comlink, her fingers already dancing across her controls again, undaunted. "Spoofing with what, Captain?" "Our emitters took the brunt of that feedback. They're toast." "Sparking ruins." "Improvise," Elena snapped, the word carrying the grit of too many lost battles and narrow escapes. The essence of human survival distilled. "You're the best damn tech on this tub, figure it out. Hack the debris field from the explosions. Turn the junk into a ghost echo that mimics our drive signature." Jax chuckled through the comms from engineering, a low rumble that eased the tension just a fraction. "Human voodoo strikes again. I'll shore up the core from here. Give me 5 minutes to bypass the safeties and stabilize the jump drive." The ship groaned as its thrusters fired in sequence, weaving a careful path through the expanding debris cloud from the reversed missiles, fragments pinging off the hull like erratic rain. Alarms quieted to a murmur in the background, but the tension coiled tighter in the air, thick and palpable, every crew member holding their breath. On the main screen, the alien probes darted closer, sniffing for the wounded prey they assumed the station to be, their scans sweeping like searchlights. Elena leaned forward in her chair, willing the stars to bend in their favor to grant them just one more miracle in this endless night. As the asteroid field loomed ahead, jagged rocks tumbling in lazy, unpredictable orbits that could shred a hull if misjudged, Sophia's hack took hold with a digital flourish. False readings bloomed across the enemy scopes. A phantom Eunice vessel drifting helplessly, an easy target ripe for the taking. The aliens bit hard, their vectors shifting en masse to pursue the illusion drawn away from the real prize. "They're taking the bait," Sophia breathed over the comms, a grin cracking through her fatigue visible even in the grainy feed from below. Elena exhaled slowly, the knot in her chest loosening for a heartbeat, but the relief soured fast as scans pinged a new, dire threat, the capital ship's primary beam weapon charging to full, its energy signature building like a star igniting, aimed not at the decoy, but straight through the asteroid field toward their real position. The rocks wouldn't provide enough shielding from that kind of power. It had carved through them like butter. "Evade pattern Delta," she barked, her voice rising over the rising whine of systems. "Full burn on the engines now. Get us out of that line of fire." The deck lurched beneath them, G-forces pinning the crew to their seats as the engines roared to life, pushing the station beyond its safe limits. Jax's voice strained over the comms amid the whine of overtaxed machinery. "Core's holding, barely. We're cooking the relays down here. One more push like that and we might lose containment." Proximity klaxons blared their shrill warning, lights flashing in sync with the pounding hearts on the bridge. The beam lanced out from the capital ship, carving a glowing scar through the asteroid field, vaporizing massive chunks in explosive silence that lit up the void like a brief dawn. One such fragment, a spinning boulder the size of a shuttle, hurtled directly toward them on a collision course, tumbling end over end. "Evasive maneuvers!" Elena shouted, but the controls were sluggish from the overload, responding with the lethargy of a wounded beast. Sophia yanked the yoke with both hands, the station drifting just enough to avoid a direct hit. The rock clipped the wing assembly instead, shearing off a bank of sensors and a spray of sparks and twisted metal that vented into space. Alarms wailed anew, secondary systems failing across the board, readouts turning red. "We lost the lateral thrusters on that side," Jax reported from engineering, his voice calm amid the chaos, a rock in the storm. "But we're through the field. Jump drive spooling up in 10 seconds. Hold tight." The asteroid field receded behind them, stars blurring into hyperspace streaks as the drive engaged, folding space around the station in a wrenching twist. The aliens' pursuit faltered in the wake, buying them precious seconds to escape. Elena watched the holoscreen flicker erratically, the cost of survival mounting in stark numbers. Forward arrays gone, hull patched with hasty welds, the crew stretched thin by fatigue and fear. But they lived to fight another moment, and that was the first real strike back against the invaders. In the quiet after the jump, as space folded and spat them out into relative safety, Elena met Sophia's gaze over the comm feed, a shared nod of resolve. Next time we don't just bounce their attack, we break them for good. The jump spat them out into the void near Epsilon Eridani, the stars snapping back into sharp focus like shards of ice reforming after a shatter. Elena gripped the armrest of her chair tightly, her knuckles white, as the Unia station groaned under the strain of re-entry into real space, the hull creaking in protest. The engines whined with a low, persistent thrum that vibrated through the deck plates and into their bones, but they held. No catastrophic failure this time. No explosive end. Status report? She barked, her eyes flicking to the flickering console readouts that danced with error codes and partial data. Jax leaned over his engineering panel on the bridge feed, his fingers dancing across the keys with the precision of a surgeon. Hull integrity at 68% and holding. Sensors are blind on the port side from that clip, but we've got partial scans operational. No immediate hostiles in the sector. Looks clear for now. Sophia eased back on the controls from her pilot's station, her shoulders slumping just a fraction in the momentary lull, the chair creaking under her weight. That was too close for comfort, Captain. If that rock had hit dead center instead of glancing. It didn't. Elena cut her off firmly, her voice steady despite the throbbing ache building in her temples from the adrenaline crash. She unstrapped from her chair and stood, the artificial gravity pulling at her like an old familiar friend after the chaos. We make for the relay station orbiting the gas giant. Get us patched up and resupplied before they track our jump signature here. Time's not on our side. The relay station orbited the system's massive gas giant, a skeletal lattice of human engineering designed to bounce signals across the vast frontier, a crucial node in Earth's fragile web of outposts that kept the colonies connected. It was meant to be a safe haven, a place to regroup and recharge amid the stars. But as the UNAS closed in on its position, the comms crackled to life with static-laced urgency that sent a chill down Elena's spine. On this is Relay Eridani Control. We have incoming signatures, multiple contacts. They're vectoring straight for you. Advise immediate evasion if possible. Elena's blood ran cold, an icy rush that sharpened her senses. The aliens had anticipated their escape route, predicted the logical jump point with unnerving accuracy. How many are we talking? She demanded, her hand tightening on the comm panel. 3 corvettes, fast movers with heavy armament. E to 10 minutes if you push the engines to their limits. Jack swore under his breath from his station, the word low but fervent. They're herding us like cattle. That micro-jump wasn't random on their part. They wanted us funneled here into this trap. Sophia's hands tightened on the yoke again, her knuckles paling as she scanned the incoming data. Options are slim, Captain. We can't outrun them with the damage we've taken. Engines are barely purring. Elena paced the cramped confines of the bridge, her mind racing through scenarios like a chess master under fire. The station was armed, but only lightly. A handful of point defense turrets and basic shielding, nothing designed to fend off a coordinated assault from multiple corvettes. The resource shortage hit her like a gut punch. They were critically low on munitions after the initial skirmish, and the ship's onboard fabricators couldn't spin up fresh ammo fast enough to make a difference. One wrong move here and the relay station would fall, cutting off Earth's eyes and ears in this entire sector, blinding the defense network. Link up with the station, she decided, her voice resolute as she stopped pacing. Use their docking arms to shield our vulnerable spots. Jax, rig the cargo bay for emergency evac protocols. We might have to abandon ship if it comes down to that desperate measure. Aye, Captain, Jax replied without hesitation, already moving, his wiry frame slipping through the hatch toward the engineering bays below. Sophia nodded, her jaw set in determination, eyes fixed on the approaching station. Docking in 3 minutes. Hold on. It's going to be bumpy. The UNES shuddered as it latched onto the station's extended docking arm, magnetic clamps biting deep into the framework with a resonant clang that echoed through the hull. Through the viewport, Elena watched the gas giant swirl below them, its bands of storm clouds churning like the gathering threat bearing down from the stars. The alien ships appeared on the long-range feed as ominous blips closing inexorably, their sleek forms cutting through the void. Alarms blared suddenly from the station's integrated feed, a chorus of warnings. They're firing! Railgun salvos inbound, brace for impact. The first volley struck the outer ring of the relay station, shearing off a massive solar array in a bloom of debris that expanded like a slow-motion flower. The UNAS bucked hard against the clamps, inertial dampers straining to compensate, the deck tilting underfoot. Elena braced herself as sparks flew from an overhead panel, acrid smoke curling into the air. "We can't stay docked like this. They'll pick us off piece by piece," Sophia shouted over the din of alarms and creaking metal. Elena grabbed the comm panel, her fingers steady. "Relay control. Divert all available power to your turrets immediately. Target the lead corvette. Aim for the engines, cripple their mobility." A harried voice responded from the station, breathless with the chaos on their end. "Power rerouted now. Firing turrets, give us what you can from your side." Lances of energy lanced out from the station's defensive emplacements, grazing the alien ship's flank in a glancing hit that sent it veering off course. But the other two corvettes pressed the attack undeterred, their weapons painting the void with streaks of plasma that sizzled against shields. Jax burst back onto the bridge, his face smeared with grease and sweat, toolkit still in hand. "Evac protocols ready in the cargo bay, but it's a gamble either way. I've prepped the escape pods with the last of our antimatter charges. We could turn them into improvised mines if needed." Elena's mind clicked into gear, the pieces falling into place. Improvise, that was humanity's edge, turning desperation into opportunity. Do it. Launch them in a wide spread toward the corvettes. Make the aliens think we're fleeing in piecemeal panic, scattering our forces. Sophia's eyes widened in alarm, her hands pausing on the controls. "That'll draw their fire straight to the pods and leave us exposed here, tethered like a target. Better than dying tethered to the station without a fight." Elena met her gaze evenly, the weight of command settling like lead on her shoulders. "Trust the plan, Sophia. We've come this far on less." The escape pods jettisoned in a flurry of activity, tiny sparks streaking away from the station into the void, their trajectories designed to mimic a disorganized retreat. The aliens took the bait without hesitation, two of the corvettes breaking formation to pursue the decoys, their guns lighting up the black as they vaporized the pods in bursts of brilliant light and expanding gas. "Now!" Elena yelled, seizing the moment. Sophia fired the station's maneuvering thrusters remotely, thanks to Jax's quick hack that had given them override control. The UNIS swung around the docking arm like a flail in the hands of a giant, using the bulk of the relay station as improvised cover against the remaining foe. The lone corvette overshot its mark in the confusion, exposing its vulnerable underbelly to the UNIS's remaining weapons. "Thrusters to full ram trajectory," Elena ordered, her voice cutting through the roar. The ship lurched forward, thrusters screaming in overload as they closed the distance. They clipped the alien vessel's wing in a grinding tear of metal on biomechanical hull, sparks erupting in a cascade. The corvette spun wildly out of control, its engines flaring erratically as systems failed. But the impact buckled the UNIS's nose section, venting precious atmosphere into the cold vacuum. Alarms wailed throughout the ship, hull breach in the forward hold, pressure dropping. "We got it down," Sophia gasped, stabilizing the station with deft touches on the controls. "But we're leaking air fast, and the pursuing ships are looping back around for another pass." Jax was already moving, patching the breach with emergency foam from his kit, his breath coming in ragged bursts as he worked. That bought us minutes, not hours. The station's reporting critical damage on their end, life support systems failing across multiple decks. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the readouts. The cost of the skirmish mounting in red warnings, the relay crippled and venting, their own ship limping on reserves, and the aliens regrouping for the kill. But in that fragile window of respite, a signal burst from the station's core arrays. Earth's reinforcements alerted at last, the first ripple of a larger response spreading through the network. Elena gripped the console edge as the signal's echo faded into static, her eyes flicking between the flickering holograph and the closing blips on the tactical display. The damaged corvette had stabilized its spin, its wounded wing trailing debris like a comet's tail, but it was accelerating again. 3 more signatures joining from the outer debris field, their formations tightening into a hunter's wedge that promised no mercy. "Reinforcements inbound for the station," she said, her voice steady despite the fresh sweat beading on her forehead from the adrenaline surge. "Added to our position, 12 minutes. Ours to hold out, 20, if we push the engines without blowing them." Jax wiped foam residue from his gloves, sealing the last patch over the hull breach with a hiss of expanding material. "Engines are at 80% efficiency, Sophia. We nurse her along or we risk blowing her to hell." Sophia's fingers danced over the controls. coaxing the thrusters into an evasive spiral that twisted the station through the void. The ship groaned in response, inertial dampeners straining against the sharp turn, lights flickering briefly. No choice here. Divert power from non-essentials. Shields first, then weapons if we have to. Elena, can you jam their comms? Buy the station more time to evac their crew. Elena nodded, pulling up the frequency matrix on her console with swift efficiency. Her mind raced through the alien encryption patterns they'd partially cracked en route. Fractal bursts of data, not unlike the complex songs of old Earth whales, but laced with quantum noise that scrambled standard decoders. She isolated a counter frequency, her thumbs hammering the input sequence with focused intensity. A low hum built in the comms array as the jammer fired up, invisible waves lancing out into the void to disrupt the enemy coordination. The lead alien ship veered sharply in response, its formation fracturing for a heartbeat as confusion rippled through their links. But then a new alert pierced the cabin, incoming missiles, 4 of them arcing in a predictive spread designed to box them in. They're adapting already, Jax muttered, strapping himself into the auxiliary station with quick motions. He rerouted auxiliary power to the point defense guns, his hands blurring as he calibrated the targeting arrays. Sophia, give me a clear shot. Zig left on my mark, sharp and fast. The stars wheeled outside the viewport in a dizzying spin as Sophia banked hard, the G-forces pinning them to their seats like invisible hands. Jax's gun spat coherent fire, lasers stitching precise patterns across the black. 2 missiles bloomed into silent fireballs, their warheads detonating prematurely in the void. But the other 2 closed the gap relentlessly, proximity fuses arming with a digital chime. Brace for impact, Sophia yelled, her voice taut. The impacts rocked the Unius like thunderclaps rolling through the hull. Secondary explosions rattling the frame and sending vibrations through every joint. Lights dimmed across the bridge, then surged back as backup systems kicked in with a groan. Elena's jammer faltered under the strain, static crackling harshly in her earpiece like interference from a storm. We lost the primary array, she reported, tasting the metallic tang of blood from a bitten lip in the chaos. Partial jam at best now. The station's life support is down to 30%. They're sealing off sections manually, but casualties are mounting fast. Jax unstrapped quickly, grabbing his toolkit from the floor. I can bypass the damage, patch the jammer through the cargo bay conduits. It'll take 5 minutes, but I need you two to keep them off my back while I work. Sophia glanced at the readouts, her jaw set in grim determination as the aliens closed in, their weapons charging signatures glowing red on the scan like embers. Go, we've got this. We'll improvise something to hold them. As Jax dashed for the access hatch, vanishing into the bowels of the ship, Elena leaned forward, her eyes scanning the tactical display for any edge. She spotted a vulnerability in the enemy formation, a gap where the damaged corvette lagged behind, venting plasma from its injured engines in a telltale plume. Sophia, that wounded one. It's venting plasma steadily. If we target its engine exhaust, we could chain react the debris field around it, turn it into a hazard. Sophia's eyes lit with grim approval, a spark of the fighter beneath her cautious exterior. Risky as hell, but yeah, it could work. Plotting the vector now. The ship surged forward under her command, engines whining in protest as they pushed harder. Elena fed the precise coordinates into the targeting system, her heart pounding against her ribs like a war drum. The aliens reacted to the maneuver, scattering their formation in a defensive shuffle, but it was too late. The Unis dove into the debris wake of the damaged ship, shields flaring against the shrapnel storm that battered them. Jax's voice crackled over the intercom from below decks, strained but focused. Halfway to the patch. What's the play up there? Buying you time, Sophia replied, her voice clipped in all business. She fired a warning burst from the remaining guns, not directly at the ships but into the debris cloud ahead, igniting a cascade of fragments that peppered the trailing corvette like a shotgun blast. The alien vessel shuddered visibly on the scans, its engines stuttering as micro-impacts shredded the vulnerable vents. A plume of plasma erupted from the corvette, chaining into nearby rocks and turning the entire field into a makeshift minefield of exploding hazards. The other ships pulled back abruptly, evading the expanding danger zone with hurried maneuvers. Got the patch in? Jax whooped from below, the jammer humming back to life stronger than before, jury-rigged through exposed wiring that sparked faintly. Full bandwidth now, they're blind to the station's signals. Can't coordinate worth a damn. But the victory soured fast as the station signal weakened on the comms, a final automated burst cutting through. Evacuation pods launching in desperation, but half the crew unaccounted for in the chaos. Elena watched the tiny dots of the pod scatter across the tactical, fragile specks against the vast stars, each one carrying lives now adrift. Sophia eased off the throttle, the UNES limping toward the fray's edge, nursing its wounds. We held the line here. Earth's fleet will clean up the rest once they arrive. Jax climbed back onto the bridge, his face streaked with grime and sweat, breathing heavily. At what price, though? We've paid dear already. Elena met their gazes steadily, the weight of command and loss settling deep in her chest like an anchor. The aliens regrouped at a cautious distance, their strike delayed but not defeated, while humanity's resolve ignited brighter in the face of the fire. They pressed on into the void ahead, unbroken and unbowed. Elena gripped the armrest tightly as the UNIS shuddered through the debris field. Fragments of alien hull and station wreckage pinging off the reinforced plating like erratic hail in a storm. The console before her flickered with incoming data streams, scans painting a grim picture of the regrouped fleet, their signatures coalescing into a tight, aggressive formation just 3 light seconds out, closing fast. They're adapting their tactics, Sophia muttered from the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing over the controls with fluid precision. Sweat beaded on her forehead, tracing paths down her temple, but her voice stayed level, the cautious edge sharpening her words into a blade. Jamming won't hold them off forever. Those bastards are already probing our frequencies, testing for weaknesses. Jax leaned over the tactical display, his wiry frame tense as a coiled spring, eyes narrowing at the holographic projections that rotated slowly, showing approach vectors. The witty spark that usually lit his features had dimmed since the station breach, replaced by a gritty focus born of survival. Then we don't wait around for them to crack our defenses. Elena, reroute auxiliary power to the forward arrays. What's left of them? Let's blindside them with a decoy burst. Make them chase phantoms. She nodded without hesitation, already punching in the commands on her console. Her brave resolve channeling into swift, efficient action. The ship groaned in response to the power shift, engines flaring briefly as Sophia banked hard left, weaving through a cluster of twisted metal that had once been part of a comms relay, now just floating scrap. The void outside stretched endless and indifferent, stars mocking their fragile maneuvers with their distant pinprick lights. The decoy fired with a digital pulse, a false signature blooming on the alien scopes, mimicking a full UNAS cruiser barreling straight at their lead vessel, drive signature and all. For a heartbeat, the enemy formation faltered, vectors shifting in confusion as targeting systems locked onto the illusion. Jax pumped a fist in rare triumph, a grin breaking through the strain on his face. Ha! That's got him chasing shadows, bought us a window. But the triumph cracked like thin ice as alarms wailed sharply across the bridge. Sophia's hands froze mid-adjustment on the yoke, her eyes widening at the readouts. Incoming torpedo lock, real one this time, not our fake. They're onto the decoy. Countermeasures now. Elena felt the chill snake up her spine, the risk hitting home with brutal clarity. One solid hit from that torpedo, and the UNIS would join the station's lost pods in the black, another casualty in the void. She slammed the countermeasures panel, flares erupting from the hull in a desperate starburst of chaff and electronic decoys. The torpedo veered off course at the last second, detonating harmlessly amid the debris cloud. But the shockwave rocked them hard, sparks flying from a bulkhead as secondary systems protested. Damage to the port thrusters, Jax reported, his voice terse as he patched the system manually, hands moving like pistons. We're limping at 60% thrust now. Can't outrun this pack if they press, need a new angle. Sophia eased off the throttle, settling the ship into a defensive drift to conserve power, her cautious nature winning out as she glanced at Elena. We need a play they won't expect, something off the script. Hiding in the wreckage, maybe? Blend with the debris? Elena scanned the field intently, her mind racing through the chaos. The aliens' ships loomed larger now on the sensors, their predatory silhouettes cutting through the stars. The echo of their first strike protocol still disrupting comms nets across the sector. This was humanity's final reality check in the void. Improvise with what you have or die forgotten. She spotted it amid the flotsam. A derelict freighter hull gutted by previous skirmishes but structurally intact, its cavernous cargo bays yawning open like a trap ready to spring on the unwary. "Use the wreck for cover," she said, decisiveness cutting through the tension like a laser. "Dock us inside its bays, Jax. Seal us in tight. We'll ghost right through their sensors. Emerge on their flank when they're overcommitted." Jax's eyes widened at the audacity, but he moved without argument. Syncing the docking clamps to the freighter's frame via remote overrides, Sophia threaded the needle with expert finesse, the UNAS slipping into the freighter's shadowed maw just as alien beams lanced past, scoring the outer hull with molten fury that left glowing scars. Inside the derelict, the air grew thick with the scent of scorched insulation and stale recyclers, the makeshift cave amplifying every creak and groan of the hulls pressing together. They held their collective breath as the enemy swept by overhead, scanners missing the camouflaged hulk in the debris clutter. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the aliens' formation fracturing as they searched for ghosts in the field. When the path finally cleared, Sophia powered up the engines cautiously, easing them free from the freighter's embrace. Jax wiped grime from his brow with a forearm, the camaraderie binding them tighter in the wake of the shared gamble. A silent bond forged in peril. "That was too close, felt like holding our breath in a coffin. But we turned their hunt inside out, made fools of them." Elena watched the fleet recede slightly on the display, the cost lingering in the air, a cracked viewport now webbed with stress fractures from the impacts, a stark reminder of the fractures yet to come in their fragile defense. The void pressed in from all sides, but they pushed forward regardless, humanity's grit carving the next desperate move in the stars. Sophia's fingers danced over the console once more, rerouting power from non-essential systems to bolster the forward shields, prioritizing survival over offense. The alien fleet loomed on the tactical display, a swarm of jagged silhouettes cutting through the asteroid field's debris like predators scenting blood in the water. "Hold steady," she murmured to herself, her voice a low anchor in the dim cockpit, steadying her own nerves as much as the ship. Jax leaned against the bulkhead for support, his wiry frame tense with coiled energy, eyes flicking between the readouts and the viewport where stars blurred into streaks from their evasive path. Elena adjusted the sensor array with cautious hands, steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead and trickling down her back. "They're deploying drones now, small ones, fast and agile. If they get within scanning range, our camouflage in the debris won't mean a damn thing." The words hung heavy, underscored by the faint hiss from the cracked viewport, escaping air a whisper of the vulnerabilities mounting. Jax cracked his knuckles absently, his wit surfacing like a reflex even in the strain. "Then we make 'em chase shadows again. Sophia, plot a slingshot maneuver around that big rock ahead. Use its gravity well to mask our vector and throw off their pursuit." The ship groaned as they banked hard into the turn, engines thrumming against the gravitational pull that tugged at the hull. Sophia nodded, her brave resolve etching deeper lines around her eyes, determination hardening her features. "Engaging the slingshot now. Brace for the pull, it's going to feel like we're in a spin cycle." The makeshift cave of the asteroid rushed up to meet them, its pitted surface a fleeting gray blur against the stars. Drones zipped past in tight formation, their scans pinging harmlessly off the rock's natural interference, deflected like rain on a shield. For a heartbeat, silence reigned in the cockpit, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the life support system cycling air. But the reprieve shattered abruptly. A single drone latched onto their hull with magnetic claws, its probe arm drilling through the weakened plating with a high-pitched whine that penetrated the hull. Alarms wailed to life, red lights bathing the cabin in a crimson glow that pulsed like blood. "It's breaching the hull," Elena shouted, scrambling for the manual overrides on her console, fingers flying to isolate the section. Sparks flew from a nearby panel, singeing the edge of Jax's sleeve as he lunged forward without hesitation. He yanked open the access hatch to the outer conduits, exposing a nest of sizzling wires that sparked and popped. "Not on my watch," he growled through gritted teeth, grabbing a tool from his kit and jamming a conductive rod into the breach point to disrupt the drone. The drill whined louder, inches from fully penetrating, the vibration humming through the deck. Sophia wrestled the controls, veering sharply to dislodge the intruder, but the added strain cracked another seam in the viewport, air whistling louder now, a thin cry escaping into vacuum. Elena patched the sensors through auxiliary lines, her mind racing ahead. "The main fleet's closing in. We lose this drone intact and they'll pinpoint us in seconds. Game over. Jax twisted the conductor with brute force, improvising a feedback loop on the fly. Electricity arced across the connection, the drone convulsing in spasms before peeling away in a burst of flame, tumbling into the void as a brief comet with a trailing tail of smoke. Relief flickered across their faces, short-lived as the ship's systems flickered in response, power dipping from the drain of the improvised fix. We bought some time, Sophia said, easing them deeper into the protective cover of the field, her voice measured. Jax slumped back against the bulkhead, wiping soot from his face with a grimy hand, the camaraderie unspoken but thick in the air, a shared exhale. Elena sealed the new breach with a spray of emergency foam, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline, the acrid smell clinging to her skin. The cost was mounting relentlessly. One less layer of armor plating, breathable air now rationed tighter to compensate for the leaks. As the asteroids began to thin out, the alien formation reformed on the scans, their probes fanning out like a closing net, methodical and unyielding. Sophia's gaze hardened on the display, her resolve unbreaking. They're adapting faster than we can counter. We need a real edge here, something they won't see coming, a curveball from left field. Jax met her eyes across the cockpit, a spark of ingenuity igniting in his despite the fatigue. What if we turn their own drones against them? Hack one mid-flight, make it broadcast the wrong data, point their swarm in circles. Elena hesitated for a split second, her cautious instinct flaring like a warning light. Risky, high chance of blowback. But yeah, our signals might mimic theirs just enough to fool the network. They worked in perfect sync, the cockpit transforming into a hive of urgent motion, hands and voices overlapping in a gritty ballet. Sophia masked their emissions to avoid detection, while Jax rigged a transmitter from scavenged parts in his toolkit, his fingers blurring over the connections. Elena fed him the targeting data from the sensors, her voice steadying as she guided the effort. Syncing frequencies to match. Now, launch the hack. The hijacked drone veered off course abruptly, broadcasting false pings that drew a cluster of its kin into a fatal collision course. Vectors crossing in the void. Explosions bloomed silently in the black, fracturing the enemy line and scattering the probes. The main fleet scattered momentarily in disarray, buying them precious distance and a momentary breather. But retaliation came swift and merciless. A capital ship in the rear unleashed a barrage of energy beams grazing their flank in searing lines. The hull shuddered under the hits, lights dimming as power surged to compensate. Shields down to 30%, Sophia reported, her grit fueling the push forward, refusing to yield. Jack sealed the latest gash in the hull with hasty welds, his wit surfacing dry and defiant. Nothing a little human stubbornness can't handle. We're built for this mess. Elena monitored the scans closely, the void pressing in with renewed weight, the stars indifferent witnesses. They had survived the skirmish intact, but the fractures were spreading, literal rents in the hull and otherwise in their resources and morale. The path to Earth's defenses lay open ahead, yet fraught with peril, humanity's gambit hanging by thinner and thinner threads. Elena gripped the console, her fingers tracing the flickering readouts as the stars blurred past the viewport in their evasive weave. The makeshift repairs held for now, but the proximity alarms wailed insistently, signaling the enemy's vanguard closing in like wolves on wounded prey, relentless. They're adapting their drone patterns, she said, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her gut from the mounting pressure. Scans showed the alien drones reforming their search grid, no longer fooled by the hack's chaos, patterns tightening. Sophia banked the ship hard to starboard, the frame groaning under the strain of the maneuver, metal protesting. Options running low, Captain. We can't outrun them forever. Not with the engines thirsting for fuel we don't have. Jax wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, tossing a jury-rigged tool aside onto the deck. He'd patched the hull with scavenged plating and sealant from the cargo bay earlier. But the engines were running hot, fuel cells dipping critically low. Hit 'em where it hurts most. Their formations tight, disrupt the lead ship's comms array. If we blind their coordination, we can slip through the gaps. Elena nodded, pulling up detailed schematics from the databanks with a few taps. The alien's tech was elegant in its design, all quantum relays and phased arrays woven seamlessly. But humans had learned its weaknesses the hard way, through captured probes and hard-fought intel. I'll need a direct link to make this work. Launch a microprobe, overload their primary frequency with junk data. Sophia's hands danced over the controls once more, initiating the launch sequence. Probe away into the void, threading the needle through their defenses. Hold on tight. The ship lurched slightly as the probe ejected, a tiny spark vanishing into the black expanse toward the enemy. Elena synced it to their systems remotely, her fingers flying across the interface. Tension coiled in the cockpit like a spring. One wrong pulse from the probe, and it could backfire spectacularly, frying their own comms in the process. Seconds stretched into agonizing eternity. The Vanguard's sensors locked on the probe, their lasers probing the darkness like fingers searching. Got the link, Elena breathed, relief edging her voice. The probe latched onto the lead ship's array, injecting a virus Jax had cobbled together from old Earth netcode. Simple, brutal code, like a digital crowbar prying open locks. The lead ship's array sparked visibly on their screens, signals fracturing into static as the disruption spread. But the aliens weren't idle spectators. A counterpulse rippled out from the fleet, slamming into the probe and rebounding toward the UNS like a boomerang. Alarm screamed across the bridge, comms firewall breached, intrusion detected. They're in our systems, Sophia yelled, slamming up additional firewalls with frantic speed. Static flooded the speakers, alien code worming through like ice in their veins, cold and invasive. Jax dove under the nearest panel, yanking cables with his bare hands to sever the connection. Sparks flew, singeing his sleeve and filling the air with ozone. Rerouting power manually. Keep her steady, don't let them take control. Elena isolated the breach point on her console, sweat beading on her forehead as she traced the intrusion. The code was adaptive, learning their defenses in real time, but she remembered the old tricks from Academy simulations, deceptive loops and dead ends. She fed it a false trail, leading the intrusion into a partitioned dead end where it could do no harm. The alien code stuttered, then died out with a final digital whimper. Silence returned to the cockpit, broken only by the hum of the strained engines and their heavy breathing. Sophia exhaled sharply, easing off the throttle to stabilize. We're clear of the breach, for now at least. Jax emerged from under the panel, grinning through the grime streaking his face. Told you, human code's got real grit. Their fancy quantum stuff can't handle our spaghetti logic. It's too clean for our mess. Elena checked the scans quickly. The Vanguard had faltered, ships milling in confusion without their lead's coordination. But the cost showed clearly. Their own comms were spotty now. A lingering echo of the breach, scrambling long-range signals and making contact with Earth harder. Reaching the home system's relay just got a lot more complicated. As they pushed deeper into the contested zone, the first glimmers of the home system's beacons flickered on the horizon. Distant, defiant lights piercing the endless night. A promise of sanctuary. Sophia gripped the controls tighter as those beacons sharpened into clear view, their rhythmic pulses like heartbeats echoing in the void. The UNS shuddered under a fresh volley of distant fire, harassing shots from the alien picket line, testing their resolve and probing for weaknesses without committing fully. She banked hard to port, weaving through the debris field that ringed Sol's outer edge, where shattered hulls from the first wave of the invasion floated like grim sentinels, silent witnesses to the war's toll. Scans picking up 3 corvettes closing fast on our tail, Elena said, her voice steady but edged with the fatigue of endless vigilance. She tapped the console, pulling up holographic projections that bloomed in the dim cockpit light, rotating to show the threat from multiple angles. They're flanking us in a standard pincer maneuver. If we push straight for the relay, we'll eat a broadside from both sides. Shields won't hold. Jax leaned over her shoulder, wiping sweat from his brow with a grease-streaked forearm. That's straight out of their playbook. Predictable if we exploit it. We loop around the asteroid cluster at Mark 040, use the rocks for cover and flip the script. Sophia nodded, her jaw set in unyielding determination. No time for debate or second-guessing. The engines whined in protest as she altered course sharply, committing to the maneuver. The plan was deceptively simple. Slip past the corvette's closing jaws, link up with the relay station orbiting in Luna's shadow. From there they could upload the counter-protocol Jax had patched together in stolen moments, a viral twist on the aliens' own first strike code, designed to infiltrate and turn their quantum networks against them from within. Earth needed that edge desperately now, with the full invasion fleet massing just beyond the Oort cloud, a shadow over the home system. The asteroid field loomed ahead, jagged silhouettes etched against the star field. A natural labyrinth of peril and opportunity, Sophia threaded the UNAS through the narrow gaps, the ship grazing a spinning boulder that sent bone-jarring vibrations rattling through the frame, alarms chirping proximity warnings. The corvettes adjusted their pursuit, their sleek forms cutting through the black like predators scenting blood, closing the net. "They're adapting to our weave," Elena muttered, her eyes glued to the projections. "Jamming's holding on the port side, keeping one off our tail. But starboard's lighting us up, sensors hot." Jax cursed under his breath, his fingers flying across his makeshift terminal rigged from spare parts. "Give me a sec, rerouting more power." He shunted energy from auxiliary systems to the jammer, dimming the cockpit lights to a faint red glow that cast long shadows. For a heartbeat, the Corvette signatures flickered uncertainly on the scans, buying them a narrow window of confusion. Sophia punched the thrusters, surging toward the relay's beacon with renewed speed. It was close now, the squat orbital platform winking in the distance like a lighthouse, its antennas trained outward like defiant fingers raised to the stars. But as they closed the distance, a new threat materialized on the sensors. The station's defenses were offline, its lights dark and unresponsive. No welcoming ping on the comms, just a wall of static that spoke volumes. "Relays gone silent. Must have taken a hit in the opening salvo," Elena confirmed, her face paling in the blue wash of the holo display. "We're blind here without it. No uplink for the protocol unless we dock manually and hotwire the systems." The realization hit like a gut punch, stealing the breath from the cabin. Without the relay intact, their counter-protocol was just lines of code trapped in a box. Useless against the armada bearing down. Sophia's mind raced through the implications: dock anyway, and risk the Corvette's concentrated fire to breach the station? Or abort the approach, fall back to the inner system defenses and pray the fleet could hold without their contribution? Jack slammed a fist on the console in frustration, the impact echoing. "We came this far through hell, can't turn back now. Dock and fight from inside the station. I've got the tools to breach their locks. Human stubbornness beats alien elegance every time, mark my words." Elena shot him a sharp look, her cautious side weighing the odds. "And if they board us first? We're 3 against a ship full of those drones. Numbers don't favor us." Sophia's decision crystallized in the tension of her grip on the yoke, resolve hardening. "We dock. No other choice. Earth's counting on us to deliver this protocol. We fail here and the line breaks." She aligned the UNAS with the station's airlock, thrusters flaring against the subtle pull of gravity wells from Luna below. Laser fire stitched the void behind them. One Corvette breaking through the jam to loose a salvo that clipped their rear stabilizer, sending the ship bucking wildly. Sparks erupted from a bulkhead, the acrid smell of melting circuits filling the air. They slammed into the docking clamp with a metallic screech that reverberated, seals hissing as atmosphere equalized in a rush. Sophia was first out through the airlock, rifle in hand, the weight of the recycled air pressing on her suit like an unwelcome embrace. The relay's corridors stretched out dark and cold before them, emergency lights flickering like dying embers in the gloom. Jax followed close, his toolkit slung over one shoulder like a weapon, while Elena covered their rear, her scanner humming softly as it swept for threats. Deeper into the station, the extent of the damage revealed itself. Conduits ruptured and sparking, walls scorched black from internal sabotage or direct hits. Alien infiltrators had been here. Probe signatures lingered faintly in the air recyclers, unmistakable traces of their presence. "They prepped this place for a fallback position," Jax whispered, kneeling by an access panel to pry it open. "Core's been fried deliberately, but I can bypass the safeties and get us in." As he worked with focused intensity, a low rumble echoed through the decks, docking clamps engaging elsewhere on the station, the sound of unwelcome company. Elena's scanner spiked sharply. Corvettes latched onto another arm. "Drones inbound. 30 seconds at most." Sophia raised her rifle, heart pounding against her ribs like a caged animal. The first drone scuttled into view at the corridor's end, its multifaceted eyes gleaming with cold light, appendages whirring to life as it oriented on them. She fired without hesitation, the shot echoing sharp and final down the hall, shattering its chassis in a spray of sparks and shattered components. But more followed in a chittering swarm, pouring from the shadows like insects from a disturbed nest. Jax yanked free a bundle of wires, cursing as the core sputtered to half-life under his hands. Almost there, uploading the protocol now. Hold them off! Elena laid down suppressing fire beside Sophia, energy bolts sizzling against the metal hides of the advancing drones. One lunged forward in a blur, its claw grazing Elena's arm, tearing through fabric and drawing a line of blood that welled hot. She grunted in pain, kicking it back with a boot, but the wound slowed her aim, making each shot an effort. The upload bar crept agonizingly to 80% on Jax's portable display. The drones closed in relentlessly, forcing the trio into a tight back-to-back formation, the corridor narrowing their options. Sophia's primary clip ran dry with a click. She switched to her sidearm seamlessly. Each shot a desperate carve into the tide of metal foes. Jax sealed the panel with a final twist just as the core whirred to full power, the counter-protocol leaping into the station's network like a vengeful ghost, infiltrating systems. The drones froze mid-stride, their hijacked systems turning against their own kind with erratic bursts of fire. The corridor filled with the acrid tang of overheating circuits and melting alloys. Silence fell at last, broken only by their ragged breaths echoing off the walls. Elena pressed a hand to her wound, blood seeping between her fingers, warm and sticky against the cold deck plating beneath. The metallic tang mixed with the ozone from the fried drone husks scattered around, turning the air thick enough to chew, heavy with the aftermath. Status check? Jax's voice cut through the haze, steady but edged with strain, as he yanked his toolkit from his belt loop. His hands, calloused from years in the engine bay's wrestling machinery, moved with practiced calm. First aid kit out in seconds, bandages and antiseptics prepped. Sophia holstered her sidearm with a click, her eyes scanning the corridor's shadows for any twitch of movement, rifle at the ready. Cores holding stable, protocols spreading through the systems. I've got pings from the outer bays. The drones are dropping like flies, systems frying one by one. She knelt beside Elena, peeling back the torn sleeve to expose the gash fully. It wasn't deep enough to hit bone, but the drone's claw had left jagged edges that pulsed with each heartbeat, blood welling steadily. Elena hissed through clenched teeth, forcing a grin despite the fire lancing up her arm with every shift. Just a scratch. Keeps me from getting too cocky out here. She shifted her weight carefully, rifle still gripped firmly in her good hand, unwilling to let go even now. The trio had clawed their way through too many tight spots on this rust bucket of a station to drop their guard for a quick med patch. Vigilance was survival. Jax worked fast and methodically, irrigating the wound with a saline spray that stung like hellfire, drawing another sharp intake from Elena. You're leaking efficiency, Captain. Hold still while I wrap this. He applied the bandage tight, his focus absolute, no room for sentiment in the field. But his jaw tightened imperceptibly when Elena winced. He'd patched her up before. Back on those grueling colony runs when raiders had pinned them down for hours. Humans didn't break easy under pressure, but they bled just the same. Red and human. A low rumble vibrated through the bulkheads then, distant at first like thunder rolling in from the void beyond. Sophia's comms unit crackled to life on her wrist, feeding her a stream of data overlays in her HUD that scrolled urgently. That's not good news. The protocols hit the mainframe, but it's fighting back hard. The alien net's got built-in redundancies, firewalls spiking across the board. We've got maybe 10 minutes before it purges our ghost code entirely. Elena's eyes narrowed, the pain sharpening her resolve into a keen edge. She pushed to her feet, testing the bandaged arm with a cautious flex. It burned like fire, but it held without tearing open. Then we push the advantage while we have it. Jax, reroute power to the auxiliary vents. Flush their overrides with an EMP burst straight from the core. It'll scramble anything not locked down tight. He paused, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit, brow furrowing in calculation. Risky move, Captain. Could fry our own network links in the backlash. Lose comms entirely, and we're blind in here. No way to coordinate or call for help. Sophia nodded in agreement, already pulling up station schematics on her wrist display, tracing paths. He's right on the risks, but sitting tight and waiting? That's suicide waiting to happen. Drones are rebooting in the hangars. I've got heat signatures lighting up on scans. If we hit now, we can turn their purge sequence against them. The rumble grew louder, shaking loose panels overhead with a metallic groan that set teeth on edge. Sparks danced from a nearby conduit, casting jittery shadows that made the corridor feel alive. Predatory. Closing in. Elena met their gazes squarely, her voice low and unyielding, carrying the weight of every life depending on them. We improvise or we die out here. Humans don't wait for the stars to align in our favor. We bend them to our will. Jax exhaled sharply, slinging his kit over his shoulder with a nod. Fine, vents it is. But if this backfires and strands us, you owe me a beer on the first habitable rock we stumble across. Sophia smirked faintly, chambering a fresh round in her sidearm with a satisfying click. Make it 2 for me. Let's move. Time's burning. They advanced in tight formation down the corridor. Elena leading with her bandaged arm tucked close to her side, rifle sweeping the turns ahead with careful arcs. The station's guts hummed around them, a labyrinth of pipes, wiring, and access shafts that Jax navigated like an old friend. His steps sure. He jacked into a junction box along the way, fingers flying over the interface, diverting power flows with overrides born of sheer grit and experience. Power shifting now, he muttered under his breath. EMP priming in the vents. 3, 2. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights pulsing like a frantic heartbeat through the corridor. From the shadows ahead, a fresh wave of drones emerged. Not the jerky, hijacked remnants, but sleek new ones spawned fresh from the station's compromised fabricators. Their sensors glowing with cold, unerring intelligence, they fanned out in a blocking formation, cutting off the path to the core access point. Sophia fired first, her shots pinging off the armor of the lead drone as it dodged with unnatural speed, servos whirring. They're adapting on the fly. The protocol's not holding against these upgrades. Elena dove behind a toppled crate for cover, returning fire in controlled bursts that lit the corridor. The wound throbbed with each movement, slowing her reload, but she gritted through the pain, refusing to falter. One drone shattered under her precise aim, shards scattering like broken glass across the deck. Jax, hit it now before they close. He slammed the panel shut with finality. The EMP burst ripped through the vents, a silent wave of electromagnetic fury that lit the air with invisible force. No flash, but a felt pressure. Drones seized up mid-motion, circuits popping in blue arcs of overload, collapsing into heaps of twisted, smoking metal. But the cost hit hard and immediate. Sophia's HUD flickered erratically, then died out completely, leaving her blind to the network overlays she'd relied on. Jax's tools sparked in his kit, one glitching out mid-diagnostic with a whine. And in the distance, the rumble escalated to a full roar, the mainframe initiating its purge, sealing bulkheads with the grinding finality of locking doors. Elena stood slowly, breathing hard, the corridor ahead now a gauntlet of locked doors and failing lights, shadows deepening. We're cut off from the core, but we're not done fighting. Not by a long shot. They pressed on through the station's betrayal, each step a raw defiance against the void closing in. Elena gripped the railing tightly as the deck shuddered beneath them, the station's core groaning like a beast in its final death throes. Systems failing in cascades. Sparks danced from a nearby conduit, casting jagged shadows that made the corridor feel alive with unseen threats lurking. She glanced back at Sophia, whose rifle hung limp in her hands for a moment. The scope cracked from the EMP's backlash. Useless now. Jax trailed close, his toolkit slung over one shoulder, fingers still twitching from the electrical surge that had fried half his gear. Take the left at the next junction, Elena said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow and the pain radiating from her arm. The auxiliary control room's our best shot. If we can reroute the purge sequence from there... A sharp hiss cut her off mid-sentence. Vents along the ceiling split open with a pneumatic sigh, spewing coolant gas that fogged the air in thick, choking white clouds, visibility dropping fast. Sophia coughed harshly, raising her weapon instinctively, but the mist reduced the world to arm's length, disorienting. The rumble intensified, bulkheads contracting with metallic screams that echoed like cries, narrowing their path like a vice squeezing shut. Gas masks, now! Jax barked, fumbling in his pack for the spares. He tossed one to each of them, slipping his own over his face with a seal's audible click, the world filtering to a hazy blue through the visor. Elena pulled hers on quickly, the cockpit muffling to a distorted haze, sounds tinny and remote. They moved forward blind through the fog, hands brushing the slick walls coated in condensation, every step tentative. Sophia took point now, her cautious steps probing ahead into the unknown. She'd always been the one to spot traps back on those tense colony runs, wary eyes that caught what bravado and haste missed. Feels tighter in here, she muttered over the comms, her voice tinny through the mask. Like the station's folding in on us deliberately. It is, Jax confirmed grimly, his witty edge dulled by the mounting strain. Purge protocols compressing non-essential sections to contain the breach and isolate us. We're non-essential now, just pests to be flushed. Elena's jaw tightened beneath the mask. Non-essential. The word stung like salt in a wound, a bitter reminder of how far they'd come from Earth's desperate launch pads. Humanity's last-ditch gamble against the alien network that had already glassed half the solar system in fire. This rogue relay station, hijacked in the early days of the war, was supposed to be their beacon home, a lifeline. Now it was turning into a tomb, cold and unforgiving. They rounded the junction carefully, the gas thinning just enough to reveal a sealed hatch ahead. The auxiliary control room, its panel flickering erratically with residual power. But two sentinels flanked it. Not the smaller drones this time, but automated turrets bolted to the walls, their barrels swiveling with cold, mechanical precision. Red targeting lasers sliced through the thinning mist, pinning them in place like spotlights on fugitives. "Down, take cover!" Elena shoved Sophia aside as the first burst scorched the wall beside them, melting alloy into dripping slag that sizzled on the deck. They dove behind a toppled crate, the air heating rapidly from stray shots that chipped away at their shelter. Jax pressed flat against the bulkhead, scanning with his remaining handheld device, its screen cracked but functional. Shields on those turrets are adaptive. EMP won't touch him without a direct overload. We need to jam their sensors or we're pinned. Sophia peeked out cautiously, firing a burst that glanced harmlessly off the turret's reinforced housing. "With what? My aim's shot to hell without the HUD guiding me." Her voice held no whine, just the flat fact, brave in the face of her own limits, adapting on the fly. Elena scanned the corridor through the mist, her mind racing for an edge. The gas vents were still open above, residue dripping down like acid rain, corrosive and slick. An idea sparked suddenly, born of those gritty simulations back on the Ark ships. Human grit turning everyday scraps into salvation against superior tech. "Jax, your toolkit. Got any conductive wire left in there?" He nodded quickly, pulling a spool from a side pouch, his eyes lighting with understanding as the plan clicked. "Yeah, and that loose panel we passed earlier, perfect anchor. String it across the laser paths. Ground the beams. Let their own precision backfire on them." It was crazy. Improvised on the fly with whatever was at hand. But Elena saw it clear as day. The turrets targeting precision as their undoing turned against them. Jax crawled forward under the intermittent fire, keeping low as Sophia laid down cover with precise conserving shots. Pop, pause, assess, pop, each one buying precious seconds in the deadly dance. He unspooled the wire carefully, anchoring it taut between deck plates like a tripwire humming with tension. The turrets fired again in unison, their lasers hitting the wire squarely. Sparks erupted in a cascade, feedback overloading their circuits in a chain reaction. One turret whined pitifully, its barrel drooping as internals fried. The other followed suit, slumping to the deck with a final defeated clunk. They scrambled to their feet, Elena keying the hatch with trembling fingers. It ground open on protesting hinges, revealing the control room within. Consoles alive with scrolling error codes. The mainframe's purge clock ticking down in ominous holographic red, 3 minutes remaining. "Inside, move!" she ordered, pulling them through the threshold. The door sealed behind them with a hiss, buying a fragile pocket of calm amid the storm. Sophia slumped against a terminal for a moment, wiping her visor clear of condensation with a sleeve. That was too damn close. "What's the play from here?" Jax was already at the core interface, his fingers flying over the keys with desperate speed. "Reroute the purge to vent the alien code instead of compressing us. But it'll fry the relay arrays completely. No signal home after this." Elena's gut twisted at the implication. The cost, the mission's very heart, Earth's hope for coordination severed in this sector. But survival came first, always. "Do it. We improvise the rest. Find another way to get word out." As Jax initiated the sequence, alarms blared anew throughout the room. The station convulsing in its death throes. A final betrayal shaking the very foundations. They braced against the consoles, their camaraderie forged in the fire of near loss, humanity's defiance burning unyielding. The purge reversed with a digital groan. Alien protocols bleeding out into the void through emergency vents, but the station listed heavily. Power failing in stuttering waves. They weren't out of the fire yet, not by a long shot. The station groaned like a wounded beast drawing its last breaths, metal bulkheads buckling under the immense strain of the reversed purge sequence. Jax's hands trembled on the console as the alien code hemorrhaged into space. A digital scream echoing through the readouts and cascading errors. Sparks showered from overhead conduits like deadly confetti, and the deck tilted sharply to starboard, sending Elena scrambling for a handhold on the nearest railing to steady herself. "Power's cascading through the systems, down to 50% and dropping fast," Jax shouted over the wail of failing machinery. His face slick with sweat under the stuttering emergency lights betrayed none of the engineer's grit that had carried them this far. No panic, just cold calculation as his fingers danced to isolate the next power surge threatening to overwhelm them. Sophia kicked a loose panel aside with her boot, her cautious nature sharpening into decisive action amid the chaos. She hauled herself to the auxiliary controls, her visor fogging slightly from her ragged breaths inside the mask. "We need to stabilize the core before it rips the whole station apart. Elena, auxiliary thrusters. Fire them manually if the automatics fail." Elena nodded, her brave resolve a quiet fire burning amid the encroaching chaos. She wedged herself into the access hatch to the thruster controls, the acrid smell of burning circuits clawing at her throat through the mask's filter. The manual override was a tangled mess of exposed wires, humming with residual energy from the alien intrusion that still lingered like a poison. One wrong touch amid the sparks and she'd fry herself along with the ship, ending it all in a flash. But hesitation wasn't an option. The station's uncontrolled spin was accelerating, flinging loose debris like shrapnel across the room. "Thrusters online, firing now!" Elena grunted, slamming the lever forward with her good arm. A jolt rocked through the structure, the station shuddering violently as counterforce from the thrusters kicked in.